Good evening and welcome to the Women Divers Hall of Fame Voices Beneath the Waves. My name is Stephanie Miele and I am your host. This month's special guest is Liz Taylor, and she is an amazing, remarkable individual, and I'm really excited to ask her all of the questions and begin this journey in understanding an ocean pioneer and what makes her tick. So, hey Liz,
Hey, how's it going?
how are you?
Great. Thanks for having me on.
Oh, thanks for being on. I've been looking forward to this. I know of you, but pre-show we were talking. We've never met in person yet, but it was good to put a face with a name, and I'm excited to learn more about your journey. But I did want to read a small snippet of your bio to give the audience an understanding of who you are, and it'll allow me to ask more questions. So bear with me. So Liz Taylor has been involved with deep ocean exploration and research, DOER Marine from its inception, becoming president in 1994. The company designs and builds submersibles and other subsea systems. As an advisor to Cal Maritime, the Wild Oyster Project, and the Deepwater Horizon Study Group, she advocates for public access to the water and broadening water competency. That's a smidgen of what you have accomplished and what you do. So, can you talk to me a little bit about DOER, what it is, and the why behind what you guys do?
Yeah, so I mean, it's really about expanding access, working access to the ocean. As divers, we're very kind of limited to, that little tiny layer at the surface, and it's such a huge and vertical environment that's interconnected in ways that we're just beginning to understand. And to be able to bring not just to scientists, but to explorers and kids and people of all kinds, to be able to bring that gift of time below the surface is critically important. And that's why we work with human-occupied vehicles, which are kind of our most favorite thing to work with. But we also work with remotely operated vehicles, autonomous underwater vehicles, and a whole host of different bespoke tools for sampling and accessing even the deepest parts of the sea.
Neat. So, how did your journey begin? Walk me through your steps and foray into this.
So, both of my parents are ocean related, I'll say. My dad was an invertebrate zoologist, so we had all kinds of clams and worms and oysters and whelks in the kitchen, in the garage, tanks full of them everywhere. I had a pet whelk named Lawrence that would escape constantly, and we'd always have to go get fresh water for him. And then, my mother, I'll just say it but my mother is Sylvia Earle, and ocean explorer as well. And so, from a very young age, I was pressing plants also in the garage. We had an herbarium in the home, and so I learned how to collect seaweeds of all kinds from a very young age along the Gulf Coast of Florida. And then from there went on as she moved up the coast and took a position up at Harvard University. I found myself spending a lot of time in the Museum of Comparative Zoology and crawling around through all the different behind the scenes areas there.
Wow.
And then we went to ended up in Los Angeles for a while. My then stepfather was head of the Natural History Museum. So I kind of grew up with life in the museum, like in the movie.
Yes.
And pulled out of school a lot as a kid, very disappointed formal education, but I got really great education just being in the field. So being able to go out on trips, I, for the first time, did scuba diving when I was just a bit short of 9 years old. And it was just, my only instructions were breathe normally. And then I got certified in the Bahamas during the Hydrolab project. And Sylvia was in saturation in Hydrolab. I was the overnight operator. I was about 13 years old at the time, and got a very immersive experience in in getting certified there. Back when, NAUI training was like a 2-week intensive thing, and I felt like I was in the Navy SEALs.
Yes, yes, that is quite the intensive training.
It really was, but I endured that, and really, really came to recognize how little we know, and seeing fishes and other animals as real individuals, particularly around a subsea habitat. There's ones that just occupy. There was always this one barracuda underneath, the same one every day underneath the float at the top, and then there was a grouper that was right by that rock every day. And you get to know those animals as individuals. It really changes your perspective. But then you can only go so deep, and then how do we go down to like where they're spawning and feeding and doing all their things that we can't normally access? So it really led me to want to build technology to expand our access.
Did you have any aha moments where, so obviously as a kid you were exposed to a lot of different opportunities and the science behind it. You saw the love of the ocean from both your parents, but did you ever think to yourself that was there a moment where you're like, this is for me? Did anything stick out to you? I'm always curious about that.
Well, I think it just, spending time with other people that really aren't as dialed into the ocean and how it connects us all, and then just speaking with them and just seeing like them have the aha moment of connectivity where they realize water really does connect us all. And
Yes.
I really should maybe think about the value of a fish alive versus just a landed fish on the dock by the pound, and just kind of seeing that spark in people that have only ever thought of, say, a swordfish as a swimming in lemon butter, and they see one alive from the cabin of a submersible, and they're fundamentally changed. And I saw that happen in action during the Sustainable Seas expeditions, which was a 5-year program where we had the little deep worker submersibles from a Canadian company from NUTCO Research, and we trained more than 100 scientists to operate those directly, and took them throughout all the U.S. marine sanctuaries. And the one guy, he had this encounter with a swordfish, and he came up and he was just like, "Oh, I can't ever eat a swordfish again in my life. I've seen it's like encountering a tiger in the jungle.
Yeah.
I've never understood how beautiful and powerful they are, and they can flash bars of color." And he's just like blah 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 blah. Couldn't stop talking about this fish. But from then on, he just became a fish advocate instead of a fish eater.
Huh. That's a really cool story.
Yeah, very cool.
Interesting. So you spent some time up in New England then?
So yeah, we spent as a kid up there in Boston. It was an interesting time. I was actually kind of back and forth during the school year. Boston, Florida, and then Boston, Los Angeles, Florida. So kind of a coastal triangulation going on.
Yeah, sounds it. I say that because I'm from Rhode Island, so I've got to give a shout out to all my New England people. So it's a very special place, special diving. That's where I did a lot of my diving. So whenever I hear that people have been there and stayed there for a while, I always find this kinship, and it's an amazing subset of species that are there, and what you underwater is just simply stunning. Even though it's not crystal clear, it's so biodiverse. You never see the same thing twice. I've always been amazed by that by my time in New England.
Yeah, it's absolutely true. And one of the things that we found by having sort of ordinary people become submersible pilots, or taking them down in a submersible, particularly where it's cold water. Many divers are, I'm just doing the tropics, warm water. I'm not touching the cold. I'd only be choked out by a dry suit, those sorts of things. Yeah, and so having the opportunity to take them directly into the ocean. So it's one of the real gifts that we have been able to experience, where we have those opportunities to take people that might not be divers, or they're just not going to do cold water diving, and have them see what a rich and biodiverse region the cold water areas can provide.
Yeah, a lot of people that they just simply don't know, and are amazed when they go diving and see such scenery. It's transformational. The so do you have a place do you have top 3 places that you've been in the water? If you had to pick top 3 places, I got this question. My staff wanted to know this.
Yeah.
Top 3 places that that you would go back to over and over again.
Well, one of the top 3 places is a place we're getting ready to go back to, which is French Polynesia.
Oh.
We're building a pair of 1,200 meter rated submersibles, which will be living their whole lives in French Polynesia. But it's such beautiful diving there through the Pacific. It's just a gorgeous area, very biodiverse, great terrain underwater, and just a lot to be learned there. And so that's one. And then I'd have to say sort of, kind of the area I grew up, but back at the time when I grew up there off the coast of Florida, so much has changed there. So if I could go back, 20 years, 30 years, it would be, definitely be a top spot. And I really look forward to someday, hopefully seeing it recover.
Yeah.
And then I guess a third spot, Galapagos is of course a really interesting destination underwater, and another one where people think of all the animals on the land, the big tortoises and all the things that are there, but they're not really thinking about too much about the animals that live underwater in that marine park.
Yeah, it's spectacular. So nice. Yeah, that was a question I had to ask. So I asked it. That's pretty fascinating. It's definitely diverse too. So
you get those big currents that come and converge in the tropics, cold current,
yes.
hot air, all the interesting things that can happen.
Oh yeah. So the name of this podcast is Inside the Mind of an Ocean Pioneer. How do you define pioneer? What would you, if you could add some adjectives to that, how would you describe that?
Well, I think a lot of it is just kind of having natural tenacity and grit, and being able just to be adaptable and figure things out, and things never kind of go along the way that you might predict, and so you've got to just be able to pivot and figure your way along. You don't always have like a nice Waze or Garmin InReach or something to guide us. So we have to just sort of suss it out.
Yeah, isn't that the truth? It's I'm always interested in the junctures or the roadblocks that people have come up against, because in my opinion that's where you learn the most, is when you come up against a challenge. You not only learn about that challenge, but you learn about yourself, the grit, the tenacity, and sometimes that comes with just simply age and time in the game.
That's
but
true.
Does anything come to mind when I said that about the roadblock, the juncture? Anything come to mind that kind of you wouldn't mind sharing with the audience?
Well, sure. I think it's something that that we see increasingly in so many coastal communities. It's really the struggle and the loss of working access to the waterways. So in so many places we see port communities that have come up around fishing or maritime or whatever, and those resources, those vital resources to directly connect to the water, to access the water, are just shoved aside because we're going to put up $1 million condos. And it's just so frustrating to see that. And it's we our little company was physically displaced by a very large commercial development that came into a very long time World War II marina complex with hundreds of small businesses, and was just cast aside for condominium development. And it was one of the biggest hurdles that we ever had to overcome, was to kind of be kind of targeted by development, made an example of that weird woman that likes to do things underwater. She's a thorn in our side. She's got to go. And so then we had to kind of adapt and kind of recreate ourselves, and we did. We were able to find another space, not as close to the water, but close enough, and we were able just to kind of expand our operations. And I did what in the middle of the pandemic? But I opened a dive shop. and so just crazy things like this that you just have to kind of think about, where is the need? And at that point, people were just showing up at the door and saying, we formed a social bubble, but nobody will fill our tanks. And we know that you take care of the fire department and the police divers. And would you fill our tanks? And I'm like, yes.
Nice.
Just trying to keep people connected. So,
Yes.
but I see it almost every city I go to, every coastal city I go to, where the maritime, which is vital for so many jobs and just sparking innovation, and people that working in those really I hate to call them like kind of blue collar jobs, but they're blue green technical jobs.
Yes.
And to see that that's just becoming more and more rare around the world to have that working access. So, everybody in your coastal communities, take care of them.
Yes.
Take maritime, take care of that working access, because when it's gone, it's gone.
It's gone. You don't get it back.
You don't get it back. No.
No. It's that's an interesting story. It's I find that I'm trying to phrase my question correctly, or my statement. It definitely does take quite a bit to be able to work a problem like that,
Right.
especially as a business owner. There are people that depend upon your decision processes because their livelihoods depend upon it. So when something like that happens and you truly have to pivot, never mind COVID, that's a master class in business
Yeah.
acumen times 20. But when your physical space is displaced, you have not only that, you have yourself, you have your entire team, everybody that depends upon it, and it's that grit, tenacity, and that the lady that is a thorn in the side is typically the one that gets something done. I mean,
Yeah, it's true. But you've just got to keep going. And I always tell people when they come to me and they're like, "Oh God, this thing is happening." I'm like, look, when you're going through hell, don't stop. Just keep going.
Yes.
You got to just keep after it and find a path.
Yes, and sometimes a path is not the path that you intended, and there's
Not at
always
all.
something to learn from those paths, as painful as those paths may be. It's there's growth there, and I know it's sometimes easier said than done, but those of us that have done that understand the rewards on the other end of that war zone that you find yourself in.
Yeah.
So
And so now we're, kind of really working sort of around the Bay, the San Francisco Bay Area. It's like one of the most expensive places in the world to try to operate because of those pressures on the real estate and the water access. But in some areas, you do have some coastal protection. But again, it's trying to find city leadership or state leadership that wants to support blue-green innovation and small business. And sometimes it just becomes a matter of dollars and cents. They just say, hey, my tax base could be here if I put in all these condos. But then you get a little bit of pushback from other factions that say, well, we really do need to protect the coastline for some of the really essential services and the development of innovation and blue-green technology in particular.
absolutely, that's really interesting. And I mean, there are problems everywhere. It's just picking a problem, applying different solution particulars, and see what happens. And we have a belief and hope, and it's true. There's a comment. You believe in yourself, and those that surround you, and you surround others, and you rise up together and put your best foot forward and hope for the best.
It's true. And another group that I've spent a lot of time working with is the Advocacy group down at the Port of Los Angeles. And I went there when they just had a bunch of old derelict warehouses on the water on a couple of piers. And now today, some years later, they're growing out kelp, and they're growing they're figuring out ways to sequester CO2, and they're blue-green hydrogen, and all these projects that can start and grow and become very beneficial to humanity. And also thinking about just water quality and with aquaculture and the replacement of oysters. We have the Billion Oyster Project in New York, and out here we have the Wild Oyster Project. And we see people down along the Gulf Coast, again, trying to restore those natural systems that sustain all of us if we give them a chance. Quit tearing them out,
Yes. So how did that working relationship come together? It was a over time type thing, or with the Alta group?
with Advocacy, we went down and again, it was like this big visioning thing. We kind of walked around and pulled old locked doors open and kind of looked at these big clear span buildings, these old warehouses, and just kind of had the, that gut feeling of what it could become. And so it's been a real joy to work with those guys over the years and kind of help them to figure out like what are some of the projects they could really work there, even in that very, very urban area. And then how do we take some of those things that have worked there and then apply them to other places? And so it's all, and then, with the whole HONU submersible program that we have happening, where we're taking those first 2 submersibles and kind of embedding them in French Polynesia. And then we want to take another pair down to Advocacy, and we want to take another pair to 4 or 5 other, the goal is to have like 5 other Mission Blue Hope spots with the HONU program applied to them by 2030. So it's a highly aggressive program, but one that I think will make a tremendous difference in the way that we think about the ocean and interact with it.
So the project, tell me about the project. What are the goals? I mean, you mentioned the 5 different pairs, but when they're in their homes, their places, what is your end game? What do you guys want to ideally have happen?
So sort of like a sea star, 5 parts, 5 arms. So we have a Mission Blue Hope spot as one of the tags that we look for, and then we apply the pair of HONU submersibles there. So we have the 2 1,200 meter rated submersibles that are very much designed to be dual classed for science and tourism, and really the fulfillment of Sylvia Earle's TED wish to have these submersibles, things that she's very heavily involved in the design of them. So next up, we have the research affiliation. So in the case of French Polynesia, we have the Tetiaroa Society, which is a small research station on the island of Tetiaroa. And then we also have the Gump Research Center, which is on the island of Moorea, which is adjacent, where people scientists from around the world come to study French Polynesia and beyond. And then 4th arm of the Sea Star is a very truly sustainable eco resort. So in this location on the island of Tetiaroa, which was originally Marlon Brando's island, there's one of the most unbelievably sustainable resorts that you will ever think about engaging with. I think the real hallmark of it is it has a saltwater air conditioning system, or SWAC. Yeah. And so we have an HDPE pipe that goes down about 1,000 meters and brings fresh, cold seawater up, and it circulates it through the different buildings on the island. And then it returns through the research laboratory there to provide fresh seawater to them, very pristine water. And then it goes back out to the ocean. So it circulates through, cools everybody off, and you have air conditioning without burning diesel fuel on an island.
Very cool.
Pretty nice, right?
Yeah.
And you can also get condensation coming off the pipe, which produces fresh water, and that can be used for aquaponics of various kinds. So you can grow berries or lettuce or other weird things in the tropics that you might not think about.
Wow.
So highly sustainable resort. 5th element, capacity building in the community. So I'm never more annoyed than when I see a parachute expedition go on, and you get a huge research expedition that gets together and they get a big ship and they rock into a little community, little island community, and they have helicopters and jet skis and oh my, and they're there for 7 to 10 days and then they're gone. And crickets. And then what is the community left with? But sort of, gee whiz, what was that? Graph, who knows? But I really want to see bring this technology, bring this 5-part system into community and let it grow and let the local people really find great jobs that are not tied to extractive industry, but they can become engineers, scientists, submersible pilot, technician, offshore mariners, and then going into the whole hospitality side. They can do some really interesting things there with sustainable hospitality, and really making very positive change to these coastal areas that are not just tied to extracting deep sea minerals or extracting millions of pounds of fish from their EEZ. The fish are more valuable alive, and we can show people this directly with a submersible. So you can imagine taking a musician and a scientist down together, or an artist and a scientist, or two scientists, or whatever the mashup is, and then getting that real gift of time below the surface.
That's actually quite brilliant, and it's like you're going in, you're offering them not like a rinse and repeat scenario where you're teaching them, they're utilizing the system, but as time goes on, they're learning more about the system and being able to add their special spice to it, if you will,
Yeah.
because each area is different, and you have different subsets of communities, and you never know what the power of the mind can do, specifically when you're looking at a problem. I mean, they know their areas better than anybody else,
Right.
tenfold. So
Yeah.
you bring something that works, and then they add their bits and pieces to it to make it their own, and it'll just continue because there's a passion set tied to it, and it's theirs.
Yes, 100%. And the submersible vehicles, they have at least a 25-year lifespan, if not more. And kids can come up with a whole career in this area, and they can be the next leaders in ocean science and research, and really foraging those connections back to the ocean. It's really our life support system, but we're degrading it every single day. And then this lunatic scheme to go out and pull the minerals off the seabed, you're just kind of like, what are you doing? We don't know enough to know if what will happen if we start sort of just churning up the seabed in a colossal way.
Yeah, yeah. So the submersibles, how long does it take somebody to be able to train to operate one? I'm just super curious about it.
Yeah. So when we did the sustainable seas expeditions, and those were directly operated by the scientists. So it took us about 2 weeks to kind of get them pretty dialed in. If they were a diver, then it was much easier because they already understood about life support systems and buoyancy control and these sorts of things that were advantageous.
Yeah.
But that would kind of get them basic training, like a very basic training in a couple of weeks. And then, from our part, there's some groups that will say, okay, you're good to go. Off you go.
Yeah.
No, we want to make sure people are very competent and that they mostly know what to do when something goes wrong.
Yeah.
So we really like to have at least, different levels. It's kind of like when you go through diving, you can get basic open water, and then you get rescue diver, and you get science diver, and you up the ladder as you get more experience. So we kind of have people work in those different sectors. So they might do, like more emergency procedures. They might do science, specifically learning how to operate manipulator arms. We try to have people learn how to be very delicate in control of those arms, so that they're not just sort of like bashing around and knocking off a 10,000-year-old coral that they might need to take just the most discrete sample from to get enough,
Yeah.
So it's about teaching the finesse. So it's really an ongoing process. So we find that with most of our clients, we will go back to them if they bring in somebody new for training. We'll come in and work with them. We'll assess and help them to continue that journey of discovery and education. It's critically important to have people feel completely competent and in control in those situations. So it's an ongoing process, and hopefully we never stop learning, right?
I know. I obviously peeked at the website, and I was looking, and I'm like, let me just go on. This is several days ago. Let me just take a look. I was on your site for an hour and a half, and I was looking at all the pictures and the submerged. I was blown away. And so anybody that has not yet been on Liz's website, you need to go to the Deep Ocean Exploration and Research site. Look around. It's stunning and fantastic. So I think my producer is going to pop it up on the website, on this chat, so people can go right to it. But it's well done, so informative, and I was like, I need to take a ride in one of these. So everybody does. So the month of May here in the United States has Mother's Day. And pre-show, Liz and I were talking about kids, and I wish her a happy Mother's Day coming up this weekend. And for me, and based on the conversations I had with Liz, we were talking about passion points, and kids. So if you had to instill anything in our youth, Liz, about the ocean, what would you want them to understand from a simple conversation with you?
I think they just, for kids to, maintain their curiosity. It's something that happens. I think every kid is extraordinarily curious. They want to go out and they want to get wet and muddy, and they want to see that fiddler crab, or they want to, paddle out in the seagrass meadow and check things out. So, I mean, having the strength to maintain your curiosity, even as all the adults in your life will try to crush it out of you. It happens. I've watched it. It's terrible. So maintaining the curiosity, but then thinking about the ocean and realizing that it is the life support system for all of us, and thinking about how we can be better stewards for the planet, starting on with what we do on the land. So everyone has an opportunity every single day, kid or adult or somewhere in between, to make better choices about, just through our purchasing power, through our decision-making process. We can choose wisely. We can do things that support the environment. We can choose to, reduce the size of our lawn, or put in a rain garden, or any of the things that kind of help with the stormwater management to the ocean, and making sure that the water that does reach the ocean is not just laden with, trash and chemicals, that there's things we can do to stop that and to restore the health of our coastlines and our EEZs, and then the deep sea beyond. And when kids, you teach them the water cycle is job one,
Yes.
they really start to get it. And it's, even Lemony Snicket's knows the story of the water cycle is important. So you can get that book and start right there, and keep it going. Get them a hand lens, go out and get them get a time in a microscope, look at the parameciums fighting each other. It's much more interesting than a video game.
Yes, absolutely. And I see it with my own son and the generation, with the bombardment of social media, of the next shiny thing walking by, like a pair of sneakers, or this or that, but almost taking it back. And we had him in Bonaire a couple weeks ago, and it was so nice to be so quiet underwater with our son. And I think it's and I know that there are people that don't have access to the water, but nature in general, being able to just go for a walk, leaving devices home, being able to just be together, to talk, to understand human emotion. It's almost like it's easier sometimes to send a text than to have pick up the phone.
Yeah.
So instilling in the younger generation that nature, the world outside is right there. You just need to kind of step into it and enjoy what's there, because it might not be there tomorrow.
One thing that I think that really can help people, and kids especially, is to encourage them, either in in an actual journal form and write it down, or in a virtual form, is to keep a life list of animals you encounter, starting in your own backyard, in your community, and then just go forward and talk to the elders in your life, and do comparative analysis. Say, what is going on? What are the animals that you saw as a kid that are not here now? How many kinds of frogs used to be in our garden, and how many can we find now?
Yep.
Insects, birds, and of course, fish. I always talk about fish as being the birds of the sea.
Yes.
And you know how crazy birders are, right? They have a big ear. They get on a plane and go halfway across the country to see the black tufted warbler or something like this. And people can be the same way about fish.
Yes.
And so, but keeping just not just a life list limited to birds, but a comprehensive life list, and add to it, and do what you can to help restore things that are now missing. Fill in the blanks.
That's a really good point, and it makes me think. My son's English teacher this year, he's in ninth grade, and she had them compile a list of quotes and what they meant to them. And it's something for them to keep, basically. So anything inspirational.
Mhm.
So I thought that was really neat. And I think she called it commonplace,
Ah,
where you jot your ideas down, and I think she put a list of 20. You need 20 of them. And it's personal. It's meant to be personal. Things that have affected you. Quotes by individual. It could be a sports player. It could be a scientist. It could be a pioneer. It could be anybody. And I thought it was a great idea because it was meant to be a reflection point and to
mhm,
take a look. So Jack, my son, can take a look at it in a year from now and say, that motivated me. So
mhm.
it speaks to what you're saying too, where if you're keeping a journal, whether virtual or paper, and you say, my garden had a lot more of this, what's happening, and you become a researcher, and
Yeah,
that starts a spark.
it really does. And I think the other piece is actively working to reconnect art and science together.
Yes.
Um, back in the olden days, back with either William Beebe or even before them, Darwin, on the Beagle and all these old expeditions. If you go back and look, every single one of those sort of crusty old scientists, they took an artist with them because they didn't
Yes.
have a camera, they didn't have a smartphone, they could just knock off a photo of what they were studying, but they required someone who could capture and document and communicate what they were seeing and why it mattered. So you really do see now, at least I see, and I'm grateful for the efforts to kind of reconnect art and science because most educational programs are actively like ripping them apart, and we need to bring them back together.
That is very true. There's a brilliant young artist that was a past our world underwater scholar. Her name is Rosie, and she's doing literally just that. She's brilliant in all ways, but she is a very talented artist, and she's been able to go on expeditions and um, chart them in a way where yes, you could take pictures, fine, but she's there painting and drawing, and it's capturing it from a different lens, her lens. So I couldn't agree with you more. And we host the scholars here, and they're all brilliant in their own ways. But it's been rare to have an artist come through.
Yeah,
And what she's been able to do to pair the two has been really interesting. And it's also nice to see the younger generation still have that tenacity to be able to go out and forge a way that maybe isn't something that's traditional or typical.
yeah.
So I found a lot of vigor, and I felt refreshed after talking to her. All of those scholars are just damn brilliant. So
It,
it's
it,
good. It's really good to see.
yeah,
And yeah, it's exciting because I think we're bombarded with so much negativity that when you see a fresh perspective like that, it's nice.
yeah. And
Just
it's one of the real gifts of the whole scholarship program.
yes.
With the Women Divers Hall of Fame is just to be able to give kids the opportunity, and sometimes it's that gift of being able to, I couldn't afford scuba lessons on my own, but I could get the scholarship to get myself in the water.
Yes.
First step, right? Um,
Yes.
and so they can be small but incredibly meaningful um, to kids, and it's I think one of my favorite parts is seeing that spark of joy, or oh, I got selected, I got to go, I got to do this, and just that enthusiasm and curiosity amplified is wonderful.
It really is. And being able being able to host these, I get kind of behind the scenes, and I get a chance to understand more about the Women Divers Hall of Fame and what they've been able to accomplish. And
Right.
it's our 25-year anniversary. So it's been 25 years in the industry established as a Hall of Fame. And
Mhm.
within that time zone, we've been able to raise nearly $1 million worth of scholarships. That's no small feat. That was originally my first interview was with Kathy Wadig, who was one of the founders of the Hall of Fame. And it originally started as a $500 scholarship. And to see within 25 years what that has grown to in a male dominated industry traditionally is nothing short of spectacular.
Yeah.
And you almost, with those scholarships and those grants, you're telling people you believe in them.
Yeah.
And it's the voices that may never get to be heard that you get a chance to amplify, um, because so many voices have been extinguished, silenced, and everything else in between. So
It's,
being able to open that up and be a part of that, I I find so rewarding. I couldn't agree with you more.
yeah. And I well remember, going to some of the DEMA shows, and I go find my dear friend, Elise Pector, now gone, but she was just always so encouraging, and she always like, okay, let's go find a place and let's just sit and catch up and chat,
Yes. Yes.
and, and just so very much embracing the role of a mentor to so many women coming up, and of course our dear Zale Perry.
Yes.
Now she actually sponsors a really nice scholarship for people coming along, and I always think about her because that connection to art. Because another fun story, some years ago, I picked up the phone and I got this very gruff, sort of Russian guy on the phone, and he goes, "I wish to carve your mother from granite." And that was how it opened, and I was like, "Should I hang up now?" I was
Wow.
curious. I was curious. I was like, "Tell me more." And it turned out to be this sculptor who is originally from Odessa, and he wanted to honor his ocean pioneers by creating their likeness in granite, this huge chunk of granite.
Wow.
And so he did, and so he created. He did the Cousteau family. He did. Uh, and that, of course, created a lot of drama and tension right there. So he was very frustrated by that whole process. But then he did Sylvia Earle, and in due course he did Lloyd Bridges and Zale Perry, and it was really nice to see them honored in that way. And now the sculptures are currently over at the. I became the curator for them some
Oh,
weird way, and I had them all in my workshop. And when we were doing I had this. It's like Easter Island in there. I had these big heads, but when we were doing the project, the ocean layer in Google Earth, which is a huge undertaking that we did with Google and the Navy,
yeah.
I happened to have a bunch of the Google executives show up, and they came in and they saw all the heads, and they're like offhanded, we should really bring these down to the campus. I'm like, do you know how big and heavy these are? And they're like, well, make it so. And so we brought Victor out, and we drove around, and we installed all the granite heads down on the Google campus for the longest time. And we found a place that looked like little coral balmies to put them with, persimmon trees and things that looked like, a coral reef basically, and
Huh.
set these guys in there. And so everybody kind of got to know, Zale Perry and Sylvia and the Cousteaus and Stan Waterman and, all these legends
Wow.
that are carved in granite down there. And now that today they reside at the Aquarium of the Bay in San Francisco.
Very cool. Very cool. I'm gonna be in San Francisco in a couple weeks, so I might
Make a
have to go.
go check them out.
I might have to go check it out. Huh. Interesting.
Yeah.
Wow, that is a funny story. I want to carve your mom in granite.
So yeah, it was quite a journey helping Victor with his realize that vision.
I bet. I bet. Huh. That's very cool. So I want to be cognizant of time because I know your time. You're such a busy person. So thank you for doing this. Thank you for chatting with me. Um, if if you had to impart any words of wisdom for the generations coming up and those that are thinking about getting into the marine sciences, what would you have wanted to hear as a young person coming up in the sciences to motivate you?
Well, it's kind of, I mean, it's a tough one because you've got to think about, what can you do? I mean, everybody needs to make a living, right? So,
Yes.
but I think it's important to just think about what can you do where you can make a dollar, but you can also make a difference, and trying to find a path. So whether you become a doctor, a lawyer, electrical engineer, a programmer, whatever career path you end up going down, always think about your connection to the natural world and how it really does sustain us. And think about how you can keep those pathways open. You can still make a good living, but you don't have to destroy the place in the process. You can be a steward throughout your life, and just to spend time in nature and thinking about, what can you do to give back a bit. So we see even some of these people that are, the philanthropists of today, they can be the philanthropists or the supporters of tomorrow in taking care of the planet that takes care of all of us. So it really is a nice way to look at it. And if you, go a pure marine science path, it may be a bit of a struggle, but I think that in the due course, it's really worth the effort. But make sure you communicate it to others, and try to get people to understand why it matters.
Gotcha. That's a great response. I see a lot of young people saying, well, I can't make any money. I can't do this. Yes, some of those are not well paying,
Yeah.
and being able to utilize those pivots that you and I spoke about earlier, where, okay, so you have this marine science background, maybe take some art classes, maybe
Yeah.
take some marketing classes, business classes, so that you can add in different aspects to that career path that set you apart and help you grow as an individual.
Yeah. And we need like lawyers, right? We need like an injury attorney for the ocean right now.
Yes.
So it's whatever your expertise is, or wherever your path takes you, just don't forget that your life support system behind you that's backing this all up, making it possible. And take that, don't take that next quarter view all the time, but take that 100-year view, that 1,000-year view.
Yes.
The long game is what matters.
Absolutely. We've got something from Robert. The DOER website discusses submersibles for Challenger Deep. Will it be plexiglass or titanium like the local Triton submarines?
Every submersible design really depends on what the objectives are for it. We could certainly, most submersibles are built with the personnel sphere for very deep, for Challenger depth deeps, are built with titanium or steel with very small ports. And there has been a large body of work done, starting with the U.S. Navy, to see, what can we do to improve that? And some people have said, well, we could even use glass, but the engineering is not quite there yet. So there's lots of different strategies, but it depends on, like, how many people will it hold? What is the mission going to be? Does it really have to stay down for a long time and do work? Or is it just kind of a bounce dive, just to kind of see what's there? So each one takes its own sort of strategy and planning and engineering to get it figured out. But all very doable. Full ocean depth is completely doable.
Very cool.
But it's only the round trips that count with submersibles.
Yes, I would agree with that statement. Let's see, are there any more? There are no more questions at the moment. So I want to thank you, Liz, for taking the time to be with us. It's fascinating. I loved our conversation. I could have gone on for 2 hours, but I want to be respectful of everybody's time. And thank you again. And I'm excited to follow along on the journey for the French Polynesia trip. And
so if you look at honusubs.com, there's a nice story there about
awesome.
That. And let's work together to see it scale up and really help improve our access to the deep sea.
Absolutely. And thank you again. And I wish you a happy Mother's Day.
Thank you. And you too. And all the other mothers out there.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you again for taking the time to spend an hour with us. This series is a year-long series. Every month, I have an opportunity to interview a member of the Women Divers Hall of Fame. We're hitting all different subsets of specialities, from pioneers to scientists to astronauts. We have every subset in this series, so please follow along. My next interview is with an individual who is a diver in the mines and the caves in Europe. So I am excited to interview Sabine next month, and please follow along with the Women Divers Hall of Fame website to learn about the scholarships, the grants, and all of the opportunities that are available to the membership and those that are interested in becoming a member. Thank you and have a good night.